Okay, we're back. We're back. And this one we're going to look at is why Europe doesn't build skyscrapers. Now, I want to know that because where I'm from, there's not very many skyscrapers. Okay, welcome back and ting and ting and ting. I'm Mr. Giant, back with another vibe for all your ting, you know what I mean? So, let's get into this and see why there is no or little or no skyscrapers according to the description here. They don't know that skyscrapers in Europe. Let's YouTube and simmer.
Why aren't there many skyscrapers in Europe? Despite being one of the most developed, densely populated and economically prosperous continents, Europe has surprisingly few skyscrapers, particularly when compared to Asia and North America. Of the 218 skyscrapers constructed on the continent to date, 66% of them are located in just 5 cities: London, Paris, Frankfurt, Moscow, and Istanbul. So why have other major European cities not embraced the skyscraper? How do they thrive without the significant inner urban space and floor areas that these clever structures provide? And is everything about to change in our increasingly urbanized world? When skyscrapers first rose to prominence in the 19th century, first in Chicago and later in New York, many European cities were already firmly established, with grand historic buildings and public spaces.
It's a historical
room
thing.
for large new structures. Most of Europe's cities around that time were also more evenly zoned, and were not facing the high demand for floor space in key districts that typically drives high-rise development. Additionally, as the power and influence of North America began to grow, a cultural rivalry emerged between Americans who saw Europe's class system as outdated, and Europeans who saw some American ideals as eroding traditions and the European way of life. As a result, each continent became wary of adopting the other's concepts. While North America aims to become the model for a new age, Europe sought to preserve its heritage. While this explains why skyscraper construction didn't initially catch on in Europe, it doesn't explain what has held the continent back since.
Now, before we go any further here, man, I hate skyscrapers. I used to live in New York, and I remember we had to go to a doctor. I lived in Brooklyn, right? And I remember we had to go to a doctor in I think it was in Manhattan, 22 stories up. That, by the way, is the highest I've been up in a building. I don't want to do that again because it felt like it was swaying in the wind. And, I think somebody had told me one time, architecturally, it's the best way to have it not rigid because then a strong wind could blow it over. That's how it was explained to me. Comment down below if you know that to be true. But I remember going up there and being 7 feet tall, the elevator was just, cost the floor because it could be small little elevator, and I just don't like being up that high if it's a man-made structure. Now I'll fly anywhere because I'm moving and now I'm coming down. When you're up there, I see people living up there and the view. No. I don't want to be in no skyscraper. I'm scared of heights, period, man. People sleeping, and I would never feel comfortable in a skyscraper. The building I live in, 2 stories. I think that the highest I've spent any length of time is up 6 stories, and that was at the college down the street that I went to, the university down the street that I went to. You know what I mean? I know a lot of the sociology classes was on the 5th floor, highest I've been, and for the first year or so, I was totally on nerve being up that high. On the island, when I was there, I think 3 stories was the highest we've had. And I've seen some tall buildings going up there. But then with the hurricanes coming through there, which we rarely get on this island, but still, no skyscrapers for me. You know what I mean? I've thought about moving to Florida. And people are living in these condos and they have like 20, 22, 25 stories up. No, thank you. You know what I mean? No skyscrapers for this giant.
In the wake of the Second World War, many thought European European cities would modernize and replicate the skyscrapers that were rising across North America. However, in Western Europe, where many cities lost landmark and historic structures, an overwhelming desire to restore what had been destroyed took hold. In addition, the lower population of Europe at that time meant that the demand for floor area that principally drives skyscraper construction wasn't there. As a result, modest structures replaced buildings that could not be saved or restored. Meanwhile, in Eastern Europe, the expanding Soviet Union's rebuild effort consisted largely of mid-rise repetitive structures that sought to rehouse much of the population. It was during this time that Europe saw its first skyscrapers begin to rise, not in response to growth and prosperity, but in an effort by the Soviets to indicate their power and influence.
So for historical reasons, they wanted to keep it the way it was, so they didn't build them. And then, according to what he says there, Russia was building up skyscrapers to exhume dominance. So one was out of necessity per se, like New York and Boston, because they want to cram everybody into that small space there, and the best way is to go up because there's not enough room to go out, especially in New York. And the other one was political. Well, that's crazy. That's interesting though. Interesting.
While Brussels has never constructed a true skyscraper, it is partly responsible for the lack of skyscrapers across the continent. Without any significant zoning regulations in place, the 1960s saw many buildings in the city demolished to make way for large, modern structures that had little regard for architectural or cultural value. Recognizing the damage this indiscriminate redevelopment was doing to the city, many prominent figures and architects coined the term Brusselization and lobbied to introduce new planning laws. These regulations significantly limited the scale of new buildings and required historic facades to be restored and incorporated into new developments, preserving the cultural fabric of the city. The row in Brussels led to a general dislike for modern buildings across Europe, with many seeing them as bland or soulless.
See, I totally understand that because when I think of New York, granted it's very diverse and stuff. What is the culture really? You know what I mean? A new culture was formed to a certain degree, but what is it? Of course, in New York, there's different parts of New York. You have little Haiti, little Puerto Rico, and just different cultures and stuff like that. How much of that have taken away from the cultural aspects of buildings, you know what I mean? And I think that's why I'm intrigued by Europe, because they kept some of the old structures, intact and stuff like that. So it'll be like walking in time and, in the past times and stuff. Whereas in New York, it seems so industrial, you know what I mean? Granted, there's all kinds of things to see there and all of that, but, me liking history and culture and stuff like that, I'd be more intrigued walking in a place where old things were upkept, you know what I mean? It gives it such a nice nostalgic feeling, to be walking and things like that. Whereas everything just seemed industrial, for lack of better words, in New York. You're walking down on these like big, tall buildings, It kind of makes you feel insignificant and not really part of anything. I want to see in the future how skyscrapers are going to look, because a lot of them just seem sort of rudimentary. There again, for a lack of better description of it, but this is quite interesting here.
In response, numerous cities adopted similar regulations and set aside control districts, like Paris's La Défense, to keep high-rise development away from historic centres. By the start of the 21st century, attitudes around tall buildings were softening across the continent, as architectural trends moved away from box-like structures towards more unique designs, and as the world became increasingly globalised. Since the early 2000s, major financial centres like London, Paris, Moscow, Istanbul and Frankfurt have seen several skyscrapers rise, as demand for commercial space in their centres has increased. By contrast, smaller European cities that have been experiencing more modest growth have turned their focus to the environment and improving living standards for citizens. In recent years, urban areas in Scandinavia and Central Europe have consistently ranked among the highest in the world for sustainability, happiness and well-being, while maintaining importance within their national economies. However, skyscraper construction in the cities of today is no longer driven purely by economic growth or the need for commercial office space. With 60% of the global human population set to be living in urban areas by 2030, residential skyscrapers are now rising in prominence, particularly across Asia and North America. As many traditional rural-based industries become automated, millions are migrating into cities and major urban areas, driving significant demand for residential space that is often met with high-rise structures. Europe is not immune to this phenomenon, particularly in such a heavily globalized world, and with the continent's desire to keep up with the progress and economic growth of China and the US. As such, Europe could witness a skyscraper boom in the decades ahead.
See, I'm not so sure I like that, man. Because I man like countryside, you know, trees and birds and butterflies and things like that. I like that stuff. You know what I mean? Like where I live here, it's like a small concrete jungle. And even though you don't have to go too far to get into like a forest or something like that, man, I haven't seen a butterfly in years. I haven't seen a colorful bird. Maybe it's regional living or something, but you know they have to be colorful birds out here, you know what I mean? But I don't see anything like that. And another thing too, when they have these skyscrapers, you don't see the sky. I was talking to a kid at work the other day. She's like 17. And she said she's actually never seen the stars because she's been living in this concrete jungle with these tall buildings all lit up at night, so you can't really see past all the light that they illuminate in the sky with, you know what I mean? Which kind of, to me, kind of kill romance too, you know what I mean? You go under the stars and stuff. No, you can be romantic here unless you go out to buy something. Industrialization or commercialization is killing a lot of things, you know what I'm saying? But I'm on like, you know, rural areas, you know, where there's trees and meandering streams and stuff like that, you know. I'm not a skyscraper type. I'm definitely not a concrete jungle dwelling type neither.
However, with entire urban centres now being declared historically significant, and with the desire to retain as much culture and architecture as possible rightly holding strong up to the present day, the unique challenge facing future skyscraper construction in Europe is all to do with the past. If you enjoyed this video and would like to get more,
I mean, there's no real beauty to it. It's just concrete slabs with boxes in there so people could live or work in it, you know what I mean? I'd like to, if I want to work somewhere, I want to walk through something that's aesthetically pleasing, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. I'm just probably a country boy or something from an island, or maybe it's just island life that's embedded in me, you know what I mean? I hope you guys enjoyed this with me. Thank you all so much for watching this with me. Thank you for all the comments. Comment down below. Tell me what you like. Skyscrapers, urban areas with you know. But one of them was showing on here that they had all the greenery and lush stuff on the skyscrapers. I may just you know, be able to deal with that, but man, I like treading through the forest and thing, you know what I mean? That's my vibe, you know? That's why, you know, I like to go into like South American countries and stuff, but not the city part, just the part with all the lush, beautiful greenery and stuff like that. Anyway, man, thank you all for watching this with me. Remember, take care of each other, all right? Cool runnings.